Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. Since the most recent movie in the franchise came out, we are doing the entire Evil Dead series. So today we are doing the 1987 horror comedy Evil Dead 2. As for your trivia question for today, when Ash is trapping his hand under a bucket and uses a stack of books to keep it in place, what is the title of the top book? The answer will be at the end of this video. So, Evil Dead 2 is a bit of a remake, bit of a sequel, but we are traveling back to the cabin in the middle of the woods. This time, though, Ash and his girlfriend Linda are already there at the cabin. And just like last time, they find the Book of the Dead, also known as the Necronomicon, and they find a tape recorder that they, of course, decide to play, which reads passages from the book and releases some sort of great evil upon the world. The evil possesses Linda and turns her into a deadite. Ash manages to fight her off and bury her body, but we all know that's not going to last for long. Ash, of course, tries to escape from the cabin, but just like the last movie, the bridge is gone, and now he has to head back to the cabin, where things get even worse. Ash's hand becomes possessed. He manages to be able to cut it off, but now he's got a horrible demonic hand roaming around the cabin. Now, while all of that is happening, we meet some other characters. Annie, who happens to be the daughter of the people that own the cabin, and Ed, who happens to work along with Annie's father, and has some sort of romantic relationship with her. Now, these two are apparently in the possession of some missing pages from the Necronomicon, so they head to her father's cabin to try and put them together and study it more. Now, along the way, though, they find out about the bridge being out, but they run into two locals, Jake and Bobby Joe, who are willing to show them the hiking trail and get them to the cabin. Now, once they get there, they run into a quite unhinged Ash Williams. After a bit of scuffling back and forth, the group finally does manage to come together, but of course, just in time to deal with Annie's dead mother, Harriet, who has become a deadite, and now Ed has also become possessed as well. So, just like last time, can Ash be the one to save the day and survive the night? So, the way that this movie came about is Sam Raimi made a film after the first Evil Dead called Crime Wave, which unfortunately was a huge flop. So, he decided to go back to what brought him to the table and work on Evil Dead 2. And of course, he partnered back up with Bruce Campbell and Rob Tappert. When it came to financing, they asked their friend Stephen King, who really liked the first movie, what they should do. He actually talked to his producer, Dino De Laurentiis, who produced Maximum Overdrive, and talked him into producing this film as well. Now, this time around, instead of filming in Tennessee, they filmed in Wadesboro, North Carolina, specifically at the J.R. Faison Junior High School in their gymnasium. The school was, of course, closed down at this point, and they were able to do whatever they needed in there. So, obviously, there are a lot of similarities between this movie and the first one. Number one, of course, they've got Ash back. There's also the character of Linda, who's still in this story. Both the bridges get torn apart. Both of them have a Necronomicon, although in this version it looks so much better. Also, another piece of interesting information. Originally, Annie was not going to find the pages to the Necronomicon. She was going to find some sort of good version of it so it could battle the evil. There's also the necklace, which shows back up, which, by the way, in both movies, they have a sequence where it's on the floor and the chain is making the shape of a skull. Also, the same clock is used for both movies. The same tape recorder is used for both movies. And of course, Sam Raimi's 1973 Oldsmobile Delta is in pretty much every movie he's ever done. Ted Raimi also comes back for the movie, who happens to be Sam Raimi's brother. This time he's not just doing body doubles, he's actually the person in the suit for the Henrietta costume. And of course, it wouldn't be an Evil Dead movie if Bruce Campbell didn't get drenched in fake blood. In fact, the sequence where he gets hit by that geyser of blood, they did the camera angle in such a way that it made it look like he was still standing up, but in fact, he was laying down and they were just pouring tons of this stuff on top of him. And of course, just like the first movie, they used a combination of Caro corn syrup, non dairy creamer, and red food coloring to make the blood. There's also a bit of a back and forth contest of my movie is scarier than your movie. It started in the movie The Hills Have Eyes. Wes Craven had a poster of Jaws appear in that movie, and that was supposed to signify that our movie is scarier than this movie. Now, in The Evil Dead, they did the same thing with a ripped poster of The Hills Have Eyes. Wes Craven then shot back. In the movie A Nightmare on Elm Street, you can see on the television The Evil Dead. And in The Evil Dead 2, you can actually see Freddy Krueger's glove hanging in the basement of the cellar area in that film. This I found really fascinating. The character of Bobby Joe was originally written for and based on Holly Hunter, who, in fact, at the time was a roommate of Sam Raimi's. Sam Raimi, in fact, lived with her, Joel Cohen, and Frances McDormand. Now, unfortunately for Holly Hunter, the producers wanted someone a bit sexier to play the character of Bobby Joe. But now, to be fair, she may have kind of dodged a bullet, as she did not have to do a scene where she had to eat an eyeball, or get dragged through the woods by some sort of tree creature. Now, there's one sequence in this movie that I think Bruce Campbell deserves an Oscar for. It's the moment where he's fighting his own hand. In fact, most of this entire scene was improvised. They had the idea of the hand attacking, but Bruce came up with the whole thing, flipping, being hit by plates, all of it. I also especially love the fact that this movie is actually creepy and scary. Like, to this day, I won't forget the skeletal version of Linda dancing around, Henrietta changing into some sort of skull snake monster, the laughing deer I will absolutely never forget, and of course, the big giant face that burst through the door, which the crew actually named the Rotten Apple Head. Also, something interesting about that, they actually felt it was so big that they couldn't transport it, so they just left it in North Carolina, and one day someone ended up finding out that it was in a haunted house. Did you happen to know that the sequel was originally called The Evil Dead 2 Evil Dead and the Army of Darkness? That's right, Sam Raimi originally wrote the sequel to be Ash Williams being thrown back into the medieval era fighting off Deadites, which does show up at the end of this film, but is also what the third movie in the series is all about. So luckily, he got talked out of it and made this amazing remake, and saved that concept for the third movie. So when it comes to Evil Dead 2, I absolutely love this movie. It's definitely in my top 5 favorite horror movies of all time. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 5. Now, as for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode, when Ash is trapping his hand under a bucket and uses a stack of books to keep it in place, what is the title of the top book? Well, with this film introducing comedy and slapstick into the series, the book on top is, of course, A Farewell to Arms. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews. If there is a movie you'd like to see get a review, mention it in the comments. And as always, like, comment, share, and subscribe.